wonder murmur where whispers weave the heart.
Hello, little hearts. A new whisper begins. In a town cobbled with stones worn smooth by time, nestled between a bustling bakery and a quiet bookshop, stood the small hunched cottage of Arthur the Shoemaker. For 50 years, Arthur's hands, gnarled and stained like the roots of an old oak tree, had known the faithful rhythm of his craft, the sharp scent of leather, the pull of waxed thread, the steady tap, tap, tap of his hammer. He was an honest man who crafted honest shoes. But honesty, he had found, did not always fill the pantry. A bitter chill had settled over the town, a chill that crept through the cracks in the walls and clung to the very bones. Arthur and his wife, Elora, had little to shield them from it. Their fire was often just a whisper of embers, and their meals had dwindled to thin broths and day-old bread. One evening, under the dim flicker of a single candle, Arthur looked at his workbench. All that remained of his livelihood was a single small square of his finest leather. It was just enough for one last pair of shoes. His shoulders slumped. "It's the last of it, Elora," he said, his voice heavy. "So, tomorrow, I will make these shoes with all the skill I possess. If they do not sell, I do not know what we shall do." Elora placed her warm hand over his. "Then you will make them the finest pair of shoes this town has ever seen," she answered, her smile a small beacon in the gloom. "Do your work, my love. The morning will care for itself." With a heavy heart, Arthur took his sharpest knife. The leather whispered under the blade as he carefully cut out the pieces for a simple, elegant pair of shoes. His hands were too weary, his spirit too low to finish them that night. With a sigh, he laid the cut pieces neatly on the center of his workbench. A silent prayer left in a silent room. He closed the door and went to bed, the gnawing worry a cold companion in the dark. When the first rays of dawn painted the frost on the window pane, Arthur awoke. He moved slowly, the chill of the morning a reminder of his troubles. He entered his workshop, expecting to see the cut pieces of leather waiting for him. But what he saw made him stop in his tracks. His eyes widened, and he blinked, certain that sleep still clouded his vision. There, on the workbench, stood a finished pair of shoes. But they were not just any shoes. The stitching was as fine as a spider's silk. The soles were attached with a precision he had only ever dreamed of, and the leather was polished to a sheen that seemed to capture the morning light. They were perfect, magical. "Elora!" he called, his voice trembling. "Come quickly!" Elora rushed in, and her gasp echoed his own. "Arthur! When did you—" "I didn't," he breathed, running a reverent finger over a flawless seam. "I went to bed. I left only the pieces. It's a miracle." Carefully, he placed the shoes in his shop window. Before the church bells had even chimed for noon, a wealthy merchant, his carriage stopping abruptly outside, strode into the shop. "Those shoes?" the merchant declared, pointing a gloved finger. "I have never seen such craftsmanship. I must have them. Name your price, and I will double it." Arthur, stunned but honest, asked only for their fair value. The merchant paid gladly, pressing a heavy purse of coins into the shoemaker's hand. Enough money to buy food for a week and leather for 2 new pairs of shoes. That night, a hopeful energy filled the small cottage. Arthur carefully cut the leather for 2 pairs of shoes, and with a curious and grateful heart, left the pieces on his workbench as before. The next morning, 2 pairs of even more magnificent shoes stood in their place. They sold within the hour, bringing enough money to buy leather for 4 pairs. And so it went, night after night. The lone workshop, once silent and cold, was now the source of the most sought-after shoes in the land. Prosperity returned to Arthur and Elara. The fire now danced warmly in the hearth. Their table was always full, and the lines of worry on their faces softened into lines of joy. But with their comfort grew a profound question. "Who are our midnight angels, Arthur?" Elara asked one evening, as she donned a new warm cloak for her husband. "Such kindness cannot go unthanked. It would not be right." Arthur nodded, his gaze fixed on the workshop door. "You are right, my dear. Tonight, we will not sleep. We will hide, and we will finally meet the souls who have saved us." So that night, just before the clock struck midnight, they concealed themselves in a dusty old wardrobe at the back of the workshop, leaving the door ajar just a crack. The room was bathed in the silvery light of the moon. The only sound was the frantic beating of their own hearts. As the clock began to chime 12, the workshop window creaked open without a sound. 3 tiny figures, no bigger than Arthur's hand, shimmered into existence, appearing like wisps of moonlight given form. They were elves, with pointed ears and eyes that sparkled with mischief and purpose. They leapt onto the workbench and, without a single word, began to work. It was a dance of breathtaking skill. One elf, with movements as fast as a flicker of light, cut the leather with impossible speed. A second, with focused and precise motions, stitched the pieces together with a needle that moved like a hummingbird's wing. The third, with an artist's flair, hammered the tiny nails, attached the soles, and polished the finished shoes until they gleamed. Their humming sounded like tiny bells, a melody of pure joy in their craft. Hidden in the darkness, Arthur and Elara watched, tears of wonder and gratitude streaming down their faces. At one point, the quickest elf, in a flurry of motion, nearly knocked over a jar of brass tacks. It wobbled precariously on the edge of the table. Arthur let out a tiny stifled gasp. Elara quickly put a hand over his mouth. The elves froze, their large eyes scanning the shadows. The silence in the room was absolute. Arthur and Elara held their breath, certain they had been discovered. After a moment, the elves seemed to shrug, and with a shared grin, returned to their work. Just as the first hint of dawn touched the horizon, they were finished. Rows upon rows of beautiful shoes covered the table. With a final, cheerful leap, they danced to the window and vanished into the fading night. Arthur and Elara stepped out from the wardrobe, their limbs stiff, but their hearts overflowing. "They have given us a new life, Elara," Arthur whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Mere thanks are not enough. We must give them a gift made from our own hands, from our own hearts." For the next week, they worked on a secret project of their own. Elara, with her finest thread, sewed 3 tiny sets of clothes: warm woolen trousers, soft linen shirts, and little velvet coats lined with silk. Arthur, meanwhile, worked at his bench, not on shoes for humans, but on 3 pairs of miniature boots, crafted from the softest leather and lined with lamb's wool. On the night of the winter solstice, instead of leaving leather on the workbench, they laid out their gifts. The 3 tiny sets of clothes and 3 pairs of perfect little boots were arranged on the table, a feast for the eyes. Then they hid once more, their hearts fluttering with anticipation. At midnight, the elves appeared as before. They leaped onto the table, ready to work, but stopped short, their eyes falling upon the miniature clothes and boots. A hushed wonder fell upon them. One by one, they touched the soft velvet coats, ran their tiny fingers over the miniature leather boots. One of them held up a tiny shirt to his chest, his eyes wide with a joy so pure it seemed to light up the room. They quickly shed their worn, plain clothes and dressed themselves in the new garments. They fit perfectly. The elves began to dance, not a dance of work this time, but a dance of pure, unadulterated delight. As they danced, a soft, warm light began to glow from within each of them. It grew brighter and brighter until the entire workshop was filled with a gentle golden radiance. Arthur and Elora watched in awe as faint, shimmering wings, like those of a dragonfly, sprouted from their backs. The elves looked at each other, their mission complete. They had given kindness and, in return, had received a gift of pure, selfless gratitude. The final magic needed to complete their journey. They turned towards the wardrobe, and though they could not see the couple, they bowed deeply. Then, with a final joyful leap, they flew out the window, not as elves, but as true good-hearted fairies, soaring into the night sky. Arthur and Elara never saw the elves again, but their fortune never faded. The shoemaker's skill, touched by magic and renewed by hope, made him beloved throughout the land. Yet they never forgot their midnight visitors, for they had learned the greatest secret of all, that a life built with honest hands is a fine thing, but a heart filled with gratitude is the most powerful and beautiful magic in the world.
Wonder murmur, the story departs, yet the whisper imparts.